Margaret Chun had spent 32 years climbing the corporate ladder at Innovate Solutions, a mid-tier tech company housed in a glass-fronted building in downtown Seattle's South Lake Union District. At 55, she was the senior software architect, known throughout the industry for her methodical approach and legendary problem-solving skills that had saved the company millions over the decades. Her corner office on the 14th floor overlooked Pike Place Market, where she often watched tourists bustling below during her brief lunch breaks, their colorful umbrellas dotting the sidewalks like confetti. The Pacific Northwest drizzle painted streaks across her window this particular Tuesday morning in March, matching the gray mood that had settled over the office since Robert Morrison's announcement 3 months prior. Margaret had weathered economic downturns, corporate restructuring, 3 different CEOs, and countless young hotshots who thought they could revolutionize everything overnight. She had outlasted them all through sheer competence and an unwavering commitment to excellence that had earned her respect from clients and colleagues alike. Her office walls were lined with certificates, awards, and photographs from industry conferences where she had been a keynote speaker. A framed patent from her early days at the company sat prominently on her bookshelf, alongside technical manuals that showed years of wear from constant reference. Margaret's reputation in the Seattle tech community was solid gold. She mentored younger developers, contributed to open-source projects, and had been featured in several trade publications as a pioneer in enterprise software architecture. 3 months ago, CEO Robert Morrison had made a decision that sent shockwaves through the entire company hierarchy and beyond. His 28-year-old daughter, Ashley Morrison, fresh out of Stanford with an MBA and 0 real-world experience, would be joining as vice president of innovation with a salary that exceeded most senior engineers who had been with the company for over a decade. The nepotism was so blatant it made Margaret's morning coffee taste bitter every single day, and she wasn't alone in her disgust. The hiring had sparked resignations from 2 department heads and generated anonymous complaints to the board of directors. Water cooler conversations buzzed with speculation about Ashley's qualifications, her salary, and what her appointment meant for career advancement opportunities for everyone else. Veteran employees who had been passed over for promotions watched in dismay as someone with no industry experience leapfrogged over them into executive leadership. But Margaret had weathered worse storms in her decades-long career. She had survived the dot-com crash, the 2008 recession, and multiple waves of layoffs that claimed colleagues and friends. She kept her head down, focused on her work, and tried to ignore the increasingly frequent whispers in the hallways about favoritism, declining morale, and talented employees already updating their LinkedIn profiles. Please subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. Margaret had been working on something truly special for the past 18 months, a project that consumed her evenings and weekends with the passion of a woman who still believed in the transformative power of well-crafted code. During her off hours, using her own high-end workstation at home and paying for cloud computing resources from her personal account, she had developed a revolutionary algorithm that could optimize cloud storage efficiency by an unprecedented 60%. It wasn't just another incremental improvement. This was the kind of breakthrough that could fundamentally transform how companies managed their data infrastructure, potentially saving enterprises millions of dollars annually while improving performance across the board. The algorithm employed a novel combination of predictive analytics, machine learning optimization, and dynamic load balancing that had never been successfully integrated at this scale. Margaret had filed the provisional patent under her own name, paying the substantial legal fees from her personal savings account. She had consulted with patent attorneys, conducted extensive prior art searches, and carefully documented every aspect of her invention to ensure bulletproof intellectual property protection. The full patent application was pending with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and she had been planning to present it to the board at the upcoming quarterly meeting as a potential licensing opportunity that could generate significant revenue for Innovate Solutions. The technical complexity of her work was staggering. Margaret had analyzed thousands of data storage patterns, identified inefficiencies in existing systems, and developed predictive models that could anticipate storage needs with remarkable accuracy. She had built custom testing frameworks, created comprehensive documentation, and even prepared detailed implementation guides that would allow other developers to integrate her algorithm into existing systems. The algorithm wasn't just theoretical computer science research confined to academic papers. Margaret had tested it extensively on simulated environments that replicated real-world conditions, running millions of data points through countless iterations to refine and perfect the underlying logic. She had spent months debugging edge cases, optimizing performance bottlenecks, and documenting every step of her development process with the thoroughness of someone who understood the commercial implications of her work. She had even run carefully designed preliminary tests on smaller datasets at the office, always scrupulously careful not to use any company resources for what was essentially her personal research project. The results were consistently impressive across different data types and usage patterns, showing not just storage optimization but also dramatically faster retrieval times and reduced server infrastructure costs that could scale to enterprise-level implementations. Margaret had presented portions of her research at industry conferences, published academic papers that laid the theoretical groundwork, and built a network of experts who could validate her claims. She had documentation showing benchmark comparisons against existing solutions, detailed performance metrics, and projections for real-world implementation scenarios. This wasn't just another incremental improvement to existing technology. This was genuinely revolutionary work that represented years of deep technical expertise applied to solving one of the most persistent challenges in modern data management. Ashley Morrison swept into the office like a hurricane, all designer clothes, expensive accessories, and ambitious energy that she wielded like a weapon against anyone who questioned her qualifications. She immediately began scheduling meetings with every department head, promising innovation and disruption while clearly having no understanding of the technical complexities involved in actually delivering such transformations. Her office had been hastily converted from what was previously the company's main conference room, displacing weekly team meetings and forcing them into smaller, less convenient spaces. The room was now furnished with trendy standing desks that nobody actually used, motivational posters with generic corporate speak, and a massive monitor displaying real-time analytics that Ashley clearly didn't understand but thought looked impressive during video calls. Margaret found herself summoned to Ashley's new office on a Thursday afternoon, walking past the displaced conference room furniture stacked awkwardly in the hallway like refugees from Ashley's interior design vision. The space smelled like fresh paint and new carpet, a sterile environment that felt more like a showroom than a working office. "Margaret Chen, right?" Ashley said, barely looking up from her MacBook Pro, which displayed what appeared to be a PowerPoint presentation about synergistic paradigm shifts. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the kind of performative busyness that screamed inexperience trying to masquerade as executive importance. "That's right," Margaret replied, settling into one of the uncomfortable modern chairs that had clearly been chosen for aesthetics rather than functionality. She noticed that Ashley's desk was remarkably clean, with no technical manuals, no reference materials, and no signs of the deep work that actual innovation required. Ashley finally looked up, her expression a carefully practiced mixture of pity and condescension that she had probably learned in some Stanford leadership workshop. Her eyes held the kind of dismissive assessment that Margaret had encountered before from younger colleagues who mistook confidence for competence. "I've been reviewing personnel files and organizational charts," Ashley continued, her tone suggesting she was doing Margaret some kind of favor by acknowledging her existence. "You've been here quite a while. 32 years, according to HR records." "That's correct," Margaret replied, her voice carefully neutral despite the growing irritation she felt at Ashley's patronizing tone. "I started here as a junior developer and worked my way up through merit and results." Ashley leaned back in her ergonomic chair, fingers steepled in a gesture that looked rehearsed. "That's impressive longevity, I'll give you that. But I have to be completely honest with you, Margaret. The tech world moves at light speed these days, and genuine innovation requires fresh thinking. Young minds that aren't constrained by legacy approaches and outdated methodologies." Margaret felt her jaw tighten, but she had learned long ago to control her emotional reactions in professional settings. She kept her voice steady and measured. "Experience certainly has its advantages. I've seen technology trends come and go, learned from both successes and failures, and built systems that actually work reliably in real-world conditions over extended periods." Sure. I understand that perspective," Ashley waved dismissively, as if Margaret's decades of expertise were merely quaint opinions rather than proven track records. "But let's be realistic about the current market dynamics. Innovation comes from disruption, from thinking completely outside conventional frameworks. That's exponentially harder when you've been working within the same paradigms for 3 decades. I mean, no offense intended, but at your stage of career development, you're probably more naturally focused on stability and risk mitigation than breakthrough thinking and revolutionary approaches." The words hung in the air like poison, each syllable dripping with the kind of casual ageism that had become increasingly common in Silicon Valley culture. Margaret had heard subtle variations of this attitude before, whispered in meeting rooms and implied in performance reviews, but never delivered so brazenly and with such obvious satisfaction. She thought about her algorithm, sitting in her home office, representing months of groundbreaking work that could revolutionize an entire industry. She thought about the countless nights she had spent perfecting something truly innovative while Ashley was probably networking at Stanford MBA social events. "Is there something specific you need from my team?" Margaret asked, her voice carefully controlled despite the fury building inside her chest. Ashley leaned forward, suddenly animated with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she was about to reveal her masterstroke. "Actually, yes, and this is where things get exciting. I'm planning a major presentation to the board next month that's going to be absolutely transformative. A comprehensive showcase of cutting-edge innovations that will position our company as an industry leader and attract significant investor attention." She gestured toward her monitor, where Margaret could see what appeared to be a preliminary slide deck with lots of buzzwords but very little technical substance. "I need your team to provide technical support for the implementation of some breakthrough concepts I've been developing during my first few months here. Real game-changing stuff that could revolutionize our market position." "What kind of concepts?" Margaret asked, though something in Ashley's tone was already triggering alarm bells in her experienced instincts. Ashley's smile widened, showing teeth that had clearly benefited from excellent dental care and probably some cosmetic work. "Cloud storage optimization. I've been conducting extensive research into ways we can dramatically improve efficiency, reduce operational costs, and make our data management solutions exponentially more competitive than anything currently available in the market. Cloud storage optimization represents the next frontier in enterprise data management," Ashley continued, her voice taking on the rehearsed cadence of someone reciting talking points rather than explaining genuine understanding. "I've been conducting intensive research into revolutionary approaches that could fundamentally transform how we handle data storage, reduce operational overhead, and create unprecedented competitive advantages in the marketplace." She paused dramatically, clearly expecting Margaret to be impressed by her corporate buzzword mastery. "The preliminary projections are absolutely extraordinary. We're looking at potential efficiency improvements in the range of 30 to 40%, which would translate to millions of dollars in annual cost savings for our enterprise clients." Margaret's blood ran cold as ice water flooded her veins. Those weren't just similar to her own research parameters. They were eerily, suspiciously close to the exact figures she had calculated in her early feasibility studies. The coincidence was mathematically improbable, bordering on impossible. "That's quite ambitious," Margaret said carefully, fighting to keep her voice neutral while her mind raced through the implications. "Where exactly did this research originate? What's the theoretical foundation for these projections?" Ashley's smile sharpened like a blade, revealing the predatory confidence of someone who believed they had already won. "Like I mentioned, fresh thinking is the key to breakthrough innovation. Sometimes you need a completely new perspective, unburdened by legacy assumptions, to identify solutions that have been hiding in plain sight all along." The non-answer was as revealing as any confession. Margaret felt her professional instincts, honed by 3 decades of navigating corporate politics and technical challenges, screaming warnings at maximum volume. "The technical implementation will require sophisticated algorithm development, extensive testing protocols, and comprehensive documentation," Margaret said, probing for any sign that Ashley actually understood the complexity of what she was proposing. "Do you have detailed specifications prepared? Mathematical models? Performance benchmarks?" Ashley waved her hand dismissively, as if such concerns were merely bureaucratic obstacles rather than fundamental requirements. "That's exactly why I need your team's support. You handle the technical minutiae while I focus on strategic vision and market positioning. I'll need your people to help build out the complete technical framework for board presentation." She leaned forward, her tone shifting to something that sounded like a challenge wrapped in false courtesy. "Think your team can handle work at this level of innovation, Margaret? Or should I perhaps assign this project to someone with more contemporary skill sets and familiarity with cutting-edge development methodologies?" Walking back to her office through the maze of cubicles and conference rooms, Margaret's mind raced like a supercomputer processing threat analysis algorithms. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed harsher than usual, casting everything in an unforgiving glare that matched her growing paranoia. Colleagues she passed in the hallway offered their usual friendly greetings, but Margaret barely registered their voices over the thunderous sound of her own suspicions. She reached her office and immediately closed the door, something she rarely did during normal business hours. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled up her personal cloud storage account, navigating through multiple layers of security to access the encrypted folders where she had meticulously backed up every aspect of her algorithm research. Everything appeared to be intact at first glance: her source code, her comprehensive test results, her patent application drafts, her mathematical proofs, and her performance benchmarking data. But something felt fundamentally wrong, like a subtle vibration in a perfectly tuned instrument that only an expert ear could detect. Ashley's confidence had been too specific, too detailed, too precisely aligned with Margaret's own research trajectory. The percentages, the timeline, the focus on cloud storage optimization in particular, these weren't random coincidences or parallel development paths. Margaret spent the next hour methodically reviewing every file, every timestamp, every access log in her personal systems. Her home network security was enterprise-grade, with multiple firewalls and intrusion detection systems that she had configured herself. Nothing showed any unauthorized access attempts or successful breaches from external sources. That evening, Margaret remained in the office long after the cleaning crew had finished their rounds and the security guards had begun their overnight patrol shifts. The building took on an entirely different character after hours. The ambient hum of air conditioning systems became more pronounced. The distant sounds of Seattle traffic filtered through sealed windows, and the emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to shift and move with every small breeze. Using her administrative access privileges, accumulated over 3 decades of increasing responsibility and trust, Margaret began a forensic investigation of the company's internal network infrastructure. She checked server logs, reviewed database access records, examined file modification timestamps, and traced network traffic patterns with the methodical precision of a digital detective. What she discovered made her stomach drop like an elevator with severed cables. Someone had accessed her work computer remotely during a weekend 6 weeks prior, specifically the Saturday and Sunday when she had been visiting her sister in Portland for their annual family reunion. The digital forensic trail led to an IP address that she didn't immediately recognize, but the timestamp coincided exactly with Ashley's second week at Innovate Solutions. Margaret dug deeper, cross-referencing network access logs with employee badge scan records, VPN connection logs, and even parking garage entry timestamps. The picture that emerged was increasingly damning and sophisticated. Ashley had somehow gained unauthorized access to company systems during off hours, navigating directly to Margaret's workstation and accessing specific files with suspicious precision. The breach wasn't random or opportunistic. It was targeted, methodical, and demonstrated inside knowledge of network architecture and file storage locations that a new employee shouldn't possess. Someone had provided Ashley with detailed guidance about where to look and what to steal. Margaret spent the entire night in her office, fueled by black coffee from the break room vending machine and the burning determination of someone who had just discovered a betrayal that cut to the core of her professional identity. She systematically reviewed security logs spanning the previous 3 months, network access records that detailed every login and file transfer, and system modification timestamps that painted a comprehensive picture of unauthorized intrusion. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Ashley had somehow obtained administrative credentials or exploited security vulnerabilities to gain access to company systems. More troubling still, the breach showed clear knowledge of internal file structures, shared drive architectures, and specific folder locations that would have required either extensive reconnaissance or inside assistance from someone with legitimate access. Margaret discovered that Ashley had accessed not just her preliminary research notes, but also private email threads discussing her algorithm development, calendar entries showing her weekend work sessions, and even personal files that contained early brainstorming documents and theoretical frameworks. The theft was comprehensive, systematic, and demonstrated a level of premeditation that suggested this wasn't Ashley's first rodeo in corporate espionage. But the most damning evidence came from cross-referencing Ashley's access patterns with her official work schedule and badge scan records. The unauthorized intrusions occurred exclusively during times when Ashley was supposedly attending orientation meetings, team-building exercises, and company policy training sessions. She had been conducting industrial espionage while simultaneously attending mandatory new employee programs about corporate ethics and intellectual property protection. Margaret also discovered that Ashley had accessed the personnel files of other senior engineers, particularly those working on innovative projects or holding valuable patents. This wasn't just about stealing Margaret's algorithm. It was part of a broader pattern of intellectual property theft that could potentially compromise multiple ongoing research initiatives. As dawn broke over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that filtered through her office windows, Margaret faced a moment of truth that would define the remainder of her career. She had 2 clear choices ahead of her: confront Ashley directly and risk a he-said-she-said battle with the CEO's daughter, where corporate politics and family loyalty would almost certainly trump evidence and justice, or find a more strategic approach that would give her the upper hand in what was clearly going to be an all-out war. Margaret chose strategy over emotion, calculation over confrontation. After 3 decades in corporate America, she understood that righteous indignation was a luxury that women her age couldn't afford, especially when fighting against someone with family connections and institutional protection. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret executed a plan with the precision of a master chess player thinking 12 moves ahead. She carefully documented every piece of evidence, creating a comprehensive digital dossier that included screenshots of access logs, timestamp security records, network traffic analysis, and cross-referenced employee badge scan data that painted an unambiguous picture of corporate espionage. But documentation was only the beginning of her strategy. Margaret knew that in corporate warfare, especially against someone with family connections to the CEO, she would need more than just evidence of wrongdoing. She would need leverage, alternative options, and a position of strength from which to negotiate or retaliate. She began by discreetly reaching out to her extensive professional network, carefully crafted over 3 decades of industry involvement. Margaret had mentored dozens of engineers who now held senior positions at competing firms, had collaborated on standards committees with technology leaders across the industry, and had built relationships with venture capitalists, patent attorneys, and technical recruiters who specialized in high-level placements. More importantly, Margaret accelerated her algorithm development with an intensity that surprised even her. Working 18-hour days between her regular responsibilities and her personal research, she pushed the efficiency improvements from 60% to an unprecedented 75%. She identified additional optimization opportunities, developed more sophisticated machine learning models, and created implementation frameworks that would allow rapid deployment across different cloud infrastructure platforms. She also began documenting her work with legal-grade precision, taking time-stamped photographs of her development environment, recording video demonstrations of her algorithm in action, and creating detailed technical documentation that would satisfy even the most skeptical patent examiner. Margaret understood that if this situation escalated to legal proceedings, she would need evidence that was absolutely bulletproof. Meanwhile, Margaret monitored Ashley's activities with the dedication of a counterintelligence operative. She observed meeting schedules, tracked presentation development progress, and even analyzed Ashley's email patterns to understand the timeline of her planned board presentation. Knowledge was power, and Margaret intended to have every possible advantage when the inevitable confrontation occurred. Her most crucial move involved quietly reaching out to former colleagues who had moved to Dataflow Systems, Innovate Solutions' primary competitor in the enterprise data management space. Margaret had maintained relationships across the industry, and several key contacts had been trying to recruit her for years. Now, for the first time, she was ready to listen to their offers with serious consideration. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for April 15th, circled in red on Margaret's calendar like a target date for strategic deployment. Ashley had announced her presentation for the same meeting, sending company-wide emails promising to unveil revolutionary innovations that would secure Innovate Solutions' future market dominance and attract significant venture capital investment. Margaret requested a spot on the agenda through proper channels, citing critical intellectual property matters requiring immediate board attention and potential legal consultation. Her request was approved without question. After 32 years of exemplary service and technical leadership, her credibility with the board remained unshakable. 2 days before the meeting, Margaret made the phone call that would change everything and set in motion events that would reshape both companies' competitive positions in the enterprise data management market. Dataflow Systems, Jennifer Liu speaking. The voice on the other end was warm and professional, belonging to someone Margaret had worked closely with during their shared years at Microsoft in the early 2000s. Jennifer, it's Margaret Chin. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Margaret kept her voice casual, though her heart was racing with the magnitude of what she was about to propose. Margaret, what a wonderful surprise to hear from you. How are things at Innovate Solutions? I heard through the grapevine that Robert Morrison's daughter joined the company recently. That must be interesting to navigate. The comment confirmed that industry gossip traveled fast, and that Ashley's controversial hiring had been noticed by competitors who were always alert for signs of internal dysfunction at rival companies. Actually, that's partially why I'm calling, Margaret said, choosing her words carefully. Are you still serving as Chief Technology Officer at Dataflow? I am indeed. Just celebrated my 3rd anniversary in the role last month. We've been expanding our Enterprise Solutions division, and looking for ways to differentiate ourselves in an increasingly crowded market. Why do you ask? Margaret took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would irrevocably commit her to a course of action that would burn bridges and potentially end her long tenure at Innovate Solutions. I have something that might interest you from both a technology and competitive strategy perspective, and I think the timing might be absolutely perfect for both of our situations. I'm listening, Jennifer said, her voice shifting to the focused attention of a senior executive recognizing a potentially significant opportunity. I've developed a cloud storage optimization algorithm that achieves 75% efficiency improvements with documented performance gains across multiple enterprise deployment scenarios. The technology is patent pending under my name, completely independent of my current employer, and ready for immediate licensing or acquisition discussions. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds as Jennifer processed the implications of what Margaret had just revealed. 75% efficiency improvements weren't incremental advances. They represented generational leaps that could redefine entire market segments. Margaret, that's extraordinary. Are you certain about those performance numbers? Because if they're accurate, we're talking about technology that could fundamentally disrupt the entire enterprise storage industry. I have comprehensive documentation, extensive testing results, and independent validation of all performance claims. More importantly, I have reason to believe that my current employer may be planning to misappropriate this technology through questionable means. That sounds like a conversation we should have in person, and soon. Are you available for a confidential meeting tomorrow afternoon? I can arrange for our legal team and senior technical staff to evaluate your proposal. The morning of the board meeting arrived with Seattle's characteristic drizzle, as if the Pacific Northwest weather gods were setting an appropriately dramatic atmosphere for what Margaret knew would be a career-defining confrontation. She had spent the previous evening finalizing her presentation materials, printing comprehensive documentation, and mentally rehearsing every aspect of what would either be her greatest professional triumph or the spectacular end of her 32-year tenure at Innovate Solutions. Margaret arrived at the office 2 hours early, using the quiet pre-dawn period to review her strategy one final time and ensure that every piece of evidence was organized for maximum impact. She had prepared multiple scenarios, anticipating various ways that Ashley and Robert Morrison might attempt to deflect, deny, or discredit her accusations. The boardroom gradually filled with familiar faces, senior executives, outside directors, and department heads who had worked with Margaret for years or even decades. The atmosphere was typical for quarterly meetings, professional but relaxed, with comfortable conversations about quarterly results, market conditions, and strategic initiatives. Ashley arrived precisely on time, looking particularly confident in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salaries. She carried herself with the assured bearing of someone who believed they were about to deliver a presentation that would secure their position and validate their rapid ascension to executive leadership. Robert Morrison called the meeting to order with his usual efficiency, running through routine business items, financial reports, and operational updates before reaching the innovation presentations that everyone knew were the real focus of today's agenda. We have 2 presentations this morning that I believe will demonstrate our company's commitment to cutting-edge technology development, Morrison announced, his voice carrying the pride of a father about to watch his daughter shine. Ashley will be presenting her groundbreaking research on cloud storage optimization, followed by Margaret Chin discussing some intellectual property matters that require board attention. Ashley stood with practiced poise, her presentation remote clicking smoothly as she launched into what was clearly a carefully rehearsed pitch designed to impress investors and board members rather than demonstrate genuine technical understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to share a revolutionary approach to enterprise data management that could fundamentally transform our competitive position in the marketplace and establish Innovate Solutions as the industry leader in next-generation cloud storage solutions. For 20 minutes, Ashley presented concepts that Margaret recognized as distorted versions of her own research. The percentages were lower, the technical understanding was superficial, but the core ideas were unmistakably derived from Margaret's work. Ashley concluded with confidence. I believe we can achieve efficiency improvements of up to 40%, generating millions in cost savings annually. Polite applause filled the room. Robert Morrison beamed with paternal pride. Excellent work, Ashley. This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking innovation our company needs. Thank you, Margaret said, standing as Ashley returned to her seat. Before we move forward with any implementation, I think the board should be aware of some important legal considerations. Margaret clicked her first slide, intellectual property violation and strategic response. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my personal research had been accessed without authorization through a security breach of company systems. Margaret's voice was steady, professional. The research in question is a cloud storage optimization algorithm that I developed independently, using my own resources, and for which I hold a pending patent. She clicked to the next slide, showing file access logs, timestamps, and IP addresses. The breach occurred 6 weeks ago, during a weekend when I was out of town. The accessed files contained preliminary research notes that closely matched the concepts just presented. Board members exchanged glances. Robert Morrison's face had lost its earlier enthusiasm. Ashley sat frozen, her confident smile wavering. However, Margaret continued, this situation has presented an unexpected opportunity. Yesterday, I signed an agreement with Dataflow Systems to license my complete algorithm, which achieves efficiency improvements of 75%, nearly double what was just proposed. The room erupted in whispers. Margaret clicked to her final slide. Effective immediately, I'll be joining Dataflow Systems as Senior Vice President of Innovation, bringing my patent portfolio and 15 years of specialized expertise. Robert Morrison found his voice. Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we can discuss. There's no misunderstanding, Margaret said, gathering her materials. My algorithm launches at Dataflow next month, giving them a significant competitive advantage over companies still struggling with 40% improvements. She turned to face Ashley directly. You were right about one thing. Innovation does require fresh thinking, but it also requires integrity, originality, and the wisdom to build something truly valuable rather than stealing someone else's work. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Ashley? Age and experience aren't barriers to innovation. They're what allow you to spot theft from across the conference room. 3 months later, Margaret stood in her new office at Dataflow Systems, watching the Seattle skyline from a much better angle. The algorithm had launched successfully, generating exactly the performance improvements she had promised. Industry publications were calling it a game changer, and Dataflow stock had jumped 23%. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Liu. Board meeting went well. The Morrison contract is officially terminated. Your algorithm just cost Innovate Solutions their biggest client. Margaret smiled, remembering Ashley's condescending words about being too old for innovation. She had learned something valuable in those 32 years that Ashley's MBA hadn't taught her. Sometimes the best innovation is knowing exactly when and how to make your move. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, Seattle looked bright and full of possibilities. Margaret opened her laptop and began working on her next breakthrough. After all, she had a lot more innovating to do.